Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 8 of building a software factory. We are building a completely autonomous product on Ona using only AI agents. No human code here. Everything written by agents. Our product is Memo, a Notion-style note-taking app, and for the last 1.5 weeks, we've been walking through how we set the factory up, how we built the initial product, and how we went from building the base into steering the product into better taste, better design, and new features. So yesterday we touched base on the loop from operating the product into back to planning, talked on a high level about feature planning, and today I'm joined by Matt. Matt is Ona's head of product. And we're going to dive a bit deeper into the role of product management and how things are going to evolve. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I've been really excited by your work, and given my role, I have to ask, like, what surprised you most as you've gone through this about Ona?
I think I was almost most surprised by how well the self-improvement worked in terms of adding tests when all the backlog kind of was built out, how it went ahead and polished the product to an extent. That's something I didn't quite expect. I guess I probably also expect a bit more when it comes to features, and that's something maybe we can quickly go into now. And let me share my screen from yesterday. We talked about how users can bring back feedback to us. So we added now the feedback tool within the UI. This basically goes into the database, and our Ona automation is then collecting the feedback, assessing it, and highlighting it to us in Slack. And from Slack, we can then action it, which is actually a quite nice loop. And then another feature that I've started adding yesterday is actually database views. So if you're familiar with Notion, I'm sure databases are quite core at your workflows and something that we didn't have so far. And in the initial spec, if you go back, it was actually out of scope. So we focused on the editor, and having just the editor given, an editor itself and like all the functionalities that you need in the editor to make something like Notion work is quite complex already. We've gone through, I think, a few iterations on the editor and received a pretty good product from the factory. So I thought, let's go and have a crack at databases. And as you can see now in the sidebar, you can actually add a new database. And we see the database works. However, and this is, I think, where coming back to what surprised me a little bit is how poor it did on the UI testing. So this is definitely something to improve on. So something I've noticed when we add, for example, a calendar field, and we have the date picker, and the date picker is just cut off from the overflow. And it's something that's really annoying. So here I'm just going to go ahead and add this as an issue. This is a bug. As you can see, it added automatically a screenshot. So this is quite nice because Ona in the automation itself, we can make use of the screenshot, analyze what's going on to give it more context, and ultimately let the product management team take a bit of time off digging into the issue and analyzing what's going wrong. So let me submit that, and hopefully, in the next few hours, we'll see that fixed, which is, I think, quite cool loop. But we can see that depending on how it's set up, and it's probably also, on me and how I set this up initially, that it probably didn't have enough spec, and I didn't spend enough time specking it out. And to be quite frank, I can show you the baseline prompt that I used. If we look into the Ona chat that I used to plan this out, it was literally 5 lines. Asked it, okay, we want to have a database product, give it some background about the data model that Notion is using, assessing if it actually works for us. And then I went ahead to spec out the product, come up with the issues, open all the issues so you can see in the factory backlog on GitHub what the product has actually come up with in terms of the features. So you can see there's a lot of bugs here and a lot of sorry, we'll have to go back a few. There we go. So you see all the features that it opened and all the issues that it opened to build the features, which is quite nice. And as you can see as well, it discovered a few bugs in the testing and in the end-to-end tests that it then added. But yeah, so there's some improvement that we can do on that. But I think it kind of highlights, how much it now shifts from time spent on thinking about the feature that we want to build maybe what we don't want to build, because naturally, I'm already thinking, okay, what else can we now chuck at this software factory? What can we ultimately build? And Matt, maybe that's one for you. How do you think about, how should we decide what to build, given our currently limited user base on there, and maybe look at it from two perspectives: on a product where we are at an early stage, and then also looking at it at a mature product, something like Honor. How do you actually decide what to build?
Yeah, the honest answer is it's really, really hard. I think that, whenever we thought about building anything in the past, generally, it was always a trade-off of cost and time, right? Like, how many engineers is this going to take? How long is it going to take? And what's the value we're going to get? And there's varying ways to get to the answer to that question. Some of it is, you've got lots of insight from your customers. Some of it is you see it in the market already, and there's evidence that other people are already doing it. Or sometimes, honestly, and I believe this is where product-minded folks really sort of earn their money, is they've just got great gut instincts that the world's going this way, and we need to invest, even if it doesn't seem so clear right now. The real challenge of let's call it the last 6 months, especially, is those. Every estimate I've seen from an engineer or a product manager in the past 6 months has been wrong by like substantial margins. Magnitudes, yes. People think things are our sort of cognitive way of measuring things that we built up over entire careers just are not correct anymore. And something that I've seen engineers ship things that we thought would take 2 or 3 weeks in a day or two, because once you can kind of orchestrate agents in a meaningful way, like you've been doing, it's insane how fast you can go. So the conversation really does move to we still need humans in the loop to kind of polish off the UI, like you showed me, and do the last mile of things, and just to make sure we are focusing on the right things, and to maintain the product surface too. But ensuring we only add really high value things, as a level of polish that you're really proud of, becomes the job now. Whereas before it was, well, maybe iterating, and you spend a lot more time deciding what to build, because you ultimately had, you give an engineer a piece of work, you would know they're going to take 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks to build it, and then you would have to come back with something else. Whereas now that loop can be a day or 2 days or 3 days, and roadmaps are compressing too, right? It used to be fairly reasonable to say, this is what we're going to build this year. Honestly, I don't really trust anyone who can give a roadmap that's further out than 3 months right now, just because the pace of development is insane, and trying to commit to things beyond that is really, really challenging. So it's a really, really great time to be sort of in the product space and to thinking about what to build. But the role needs to be relearned a little bit, I think, and you have to really rethink about how you prioritize what you ship, and like that cost of ownership, which is the piece which often doesn't show up in these conversations, but is the most expensive bit of building now, I think, is that long-term ownership.
That's true. I guess while we can fix the maintenance of a bigger product, it still adds complexity to it and might make new additions a bit harder. But also, like what you mentioned, the estimates is something I guess it's not just a human issue, like having the estimates wrong and overestimating how much time it takes, but it's something that we see that, in the initial spec for the factory, we got an estimate, oh, this will take 3-4 weeks to build, and effectively took 2 days for it to crunch out the initial product. I guess that's also like the way LLMs are trained, and all the data that's out there on software development shows kind of timelines that are not really current anymore. So that's probably something where we'll see some alignment in the next years or months or weeks. We don't know, given how fast things are moving.
Yeah, maybe.
I guess.
I mean, I don't think humans have ever been really good at planning, to be honest. One of the reasons we had these like 2-week sprints was, general consensus was people can't really project or plan further than 2 weeks accurately. And so we tried to get it into like the smallest time boxes we possibly could, right, to try and make it work. And even now, the difference between, a super AI enabled engineer and someone who's like at the start of their journey, the difference of how long would it take to build what you've just built, or to build something similar, you would get wide ranging estimates from 8 days, which is what you've done, to probably a few months, and you're both correct. It just depends on who's doing it, and exactly where you are on that journey of figuring out AI and thinking of it as a tool, and understanding you've got to build the skill set. You've got to be good at AI tools. You don't just like type something in a box and it works perfectly every time. getting pretty good at getting close, but the people who spend the time to refine, to plan, to update the skills, to add back pressure to the system, they're the ones who are the most successful with driving incredible outcomes like you've been doing on here.
Would you say there's like a fine line or like a valid trade-off between planning too much and just, like I did, for example, with databases, spending 10, 15 minutes on kind of thinking about, oh, how could this be, discussing with the owner chat in the planning mode on, some edge cases, and then just letting it go, and now having a product that is, somewhat functional, but now I need to spend some time. I mean, ideally, the factory itself would, catch all these UI bugs. So I'm probably going to spend some time improving the automations and the tests here. But do you see there's like, a right thing or a right way of doing it? Or would you say still planning needs to be, in depth and plan it out to the maximum possible versus, just going fast and iterating on there?
This is where I think those who have spent kind of a lot of time in the industry get a really good sense for whether they need to plan or not. If I gave someone a typo on a website and says, can you fix this for me? Like, most people wouldn't write a plan to fix that typo, right? And I think the what is considered like a typo level change is now moving to be kind of complex and depends on the system and the qualities of it. But there's engineers internally who I look at something and I think this change is going to be quite large and quite complicated. And like, don't worry, Matt, I'll ship it this afternoon, because they've got such a good understanding of the system. They know they don't really need to plan. They're going to give the agent like great direction on how to ship that specific change and are able to do it very, very quickly. For myself, I would have done a plan for that and really thought about it and probably sought other humans' approval to bring them into the loop just to make sure it was the right way to approach a specific task. So it's the really sort of terrible answer that we give often in engineering, but it depends. And I think for bigger, large feature changes, I think spending that time up front on planning is always worth it, even if it's just to build alignment internally. I think one of the biggest challenges, and I do this myself, I'm awful for it, is it's not very satisfying to plan, right? You come up with this plan, you have this like Notion document, or you have a spec and owner, and you're asking questions on it, reviewing it, updating the README. Whereas if you start with like quite a simple plan, and you does it 60% of the way, like your database, there's like the dopamine receptors in your brain and just like way more activated by just one more prompt. So you might actually spend longer building the feature, but there's just something that's way more almost gamified about just pushing prompts into the prompt box and hitting enter versus spending that time up front on planning. So I feel like we've ended up in this place where we're really kind of getting to the into like human nature a little bit, right? And where is fun? And I think this is something I actually spend a lot of time thinking about now. Is like, how do I make planning feel the same as executing? And I think whoever solves this problem will build an incredible product. Actually,
that's true. That's quite cool. I mean, it's also when I think about the early beginnings of AI assisted coding, where you went file by file and you used AI to help you just write the files that you need. You had like a lot of thought around architecture still to how it works now, where kind of everything is done by your agents, and it's more about right now orchestration of agents. Especially in the case of the factory, it's all about, okay, how are the automations working, how are they interacting with each other, how do you delegate work between the agents, which is a challenge in itself. But the fun part, I guess, is more on the product side, and that's almost kind of missing right now with the way we're going. And I'm really curious how that's gonna evolve going forward.
What's your thinking? How do you think it's going to evolve?
I mean, I hope, ultimately that it's not just going to be maintenance of a factory, because, coming from engineering originally, and then hardware, building a factory once your process is running is quite cool. And seeing the output come out is amazing. But the processes that a factory needs to work are really, brutal to an extent, and sometimes quite mundane to maintain. If you think of like just a regular factory floor, you have a lot of processes that need to just work, and it's not very creative, and a lot of times how to set them up. There obviously can be some creativity, but I just hope that with the tooling becoming better and the self-improvement loops also becoming better, that even the maintenance of the factory itself is becoming something that is almost not being in focus, and the PM role, or like any kind of product role, becomes more creative again, right? That you can actually think about great user experiences, think about what is, the problem for the user ultimately, because, Chris said it yesterday, it's becoming easier and easier to feature bloat. So picking what to build will be the challenge, and I guess that will be the main task of product teams going forward. What's a good product? I guess also a question for you there is, do you see that there might be like a way going back to minimalism and having like super pinpointed products that are, just solving a very specific pain point and doing that very well, rather than having a suite of products? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I'm really interested to see how this plays out, because I think generally you see it happens all the time, right? We have a bundling and an unbundling of products, and right now we seem to be very much in the bundling phase of AI, where the Claude app or the Codex app, they do everything. They do absolutely everything. You see them doing computer use, like the same app that can drive really high quality code can also be used to submit your receipts, or to organize your desktop pictures, or to generate an image for you for your marketing website. It's very rare to have a tool that's used for 40, 50 hours a week by engineers and 40, 50 hours a week by your go-to-market team. And we're starting to see that happening with AI tools, where it's all collapsing into one subscription, into a single place. And it's the same for us. Even in as we speak more to our customers, more and more of our non-technical users are wanting to use Owner to more meaningful changes. So, we're seeing, we call them citizen developers, but we're seeing a lot of interest from product managers to use our product to prototype, or data scientists to use it to drive Jupyter notebooks without having to configure a bunch of stuff. So even a product like us, who's tried to specialize, it just naturally has this sort of latent demand. And so right now we're really seeing that. And we saw this with Netflix, right? Like Netflix, one subscription, get access to all your TV. But now we've seen that all unbundle again now, where you've got like specialized streaming platforms, where one is for reality TV, for example, and then you had Disney Plus for a while, which really focused on cartoons, and so Netflix market share started to get chipped away a little bit. And I feel like we're going to see the same things with AI tools eventually, but I just don't know when. I think Claude the Code app, for example, is becoming quite bloated now. People are still in the terminal, and I think power users, I'd be surprised if they're using the main application. But I can see one thing I spend a lot of time thinking about is like, how much of this latent demand do we want to accept, and how much do we actually want to just push back a little bit and say, look, we are really focused on software engineering. We want to be the best software engineering tool, and we're actually kind of okay if we're not for everybody. And so like right now, that's kind of the line I hold. But it's very, very difficult to hold that line, especially when you have like people literally coming to you like, I want this tool, I want to use it in a certain way. So a lot of tension here for me, and I haven't found the answer myself. The market's kind of suggesting bundling, but I hope, and I have personally have desire for like specialized tools that like really align to my use cases.
Makes sense. I guess that's I mean, the dream would obviously be a product that does everything extremely well, but I feel like it's going to be extremely difficult to achieve that. I guess one important question around here is like, when we have the essence of the software factory, and you already mentioned, citizen developers now become a role, and you have product managers trying to product or work on the product and prototype. How do you actually see this speed of the team evolving and the team involvement happening at the same time, right? Because I think, coming from, building a software factory alone, churning out product, owning all different bits and pieces, makes it quite difficult from a company's perspective to look at it. Okay, we have a team here. The team has, product manager, product designer, front and back end engineers, maybe some more roles, ops managers. How do you see like the team evolving going forward? Will everyone just be, product owner, or just a designer, or where will we go?
It's a great question, and we've been experimenting with this a little bit internally, and I'm very happy with how it's going. But generally, we don't really have specialized roles anymore, to be honest. So the org that I run is called Product Design and Engineering. We hire product-minded engineers. We hire engineers who are great designers, and we hire designers who, have shipped side projects but never really meaningfully contributed code to production. Every single one of those archetypes has added something meaningful to our team. And our designer, who before joining hadn't really spent too much time outside of Figma, is now like one of our top contributors. And the value he brings to our platform is polish in a way that I don't think I would have seen unless you've hired like an incredibly senior sort of front end person. And the more senior you go, you tend to find that there is more connectiveness between product design and engineering anyway. It's usually how they got to be more senior, right? So it's very exciting to me to see us bring in people with different backgrounds. My only requirement from everybody, and that I test for in the interview process, is you must be willing to ship and you must be AI enabled. Like if you're not already using all the AI tools in the background, you probably won't be happy here, because it's very important to me that our organization is very, very AI focused. So very much seeing a collapse into these roles of you have single people who kind of typically would have been an entire team, and taking the very best of them, heavily empowering them to be able to have that autonomy to ship, and also just knowing when to hold back and not to just ship the thing is really important too.
Kind
One
of
thing we've
product
seen
taste again, right?
product taste, that's it. All comes back to taste. But one of the things that I'm quite proud of, and is hard but is well worth it, is I think there's still this perception that using AI tools leads to slop. And I actually see the opposite. I actually hold our engineers to a much higher bar now than I did previously, because I think that once you've got something 80% of the way there, previously you might, 2 weeks might have elapsed and you wanted to ship it, you want to gather feedback, and then you can decide if to finish the feature or not. It's so cheap now to drive something to sufficient quality. There's no reason not to ship with sufficient quality. So, I hold our team to a very, very high bar of, you're probably 2 or 3 prompts away from fixing some of those edge cases that will make this materially nicer. So spend the time, please. And so that reframing of the way you can use AI, not to just to ship faster, but you can also ship at higher quality, is like really important to our team. And I think you'll see that, show up a lot in the next few months everywhere.
But I guess this is still like where you make the decision what to ship yourself, right? And you look at it from a product perspective rather than, oh, just because we can ship, we will ship it. But you have the strategy around the product there, right?
Exactly. So I can talk a little bit about how we do this internally. So we have quite simple, but we have an experimentation framework. So generally, I encourage everybody to, if they feel passionate about shipping a specific feature, like they should ship the feature. But my definition of shipping is you get it to a sufficient quality, you share a demo of it in a room we have. It's called So Many Demos. And I encourage people to share liberally there. And if you can gather some insight and some feedback that other people are as excited about this, then we will carve out engineering time for you to explore this. Then the path to production is typically get this to a place where it works and ship it on our account. So we use feature flagging to be able to, say it only works on our account, it works on our cloud products, and it's eventually to our enterprise customers. Anyone is empowered to get something onto our account. But by shipping experiment, you're also expected that you own that all the way through to delivery to production or to rollback. I roughly give engineers sort of 2 weeks to kind of get it from an experiment to something that we can ship to our cloud product, and then ultimately to our enterprise customers. And if you can't do that, we tend to roll it back and roll it out. So we give quite wide range to people to play, to experiment, to see if they can find something interesting, to exercise that product part of their brain. But ultimately, if they don't have the time, capacity, or maybe even the interest once they've got it into the first position to ship it, then the ask is to roll it back, and then we use our own automations product to find sort of latent experiments, if you will, and to delete the code and roll them back. So that's one way we've been experimenting with, kind of living in both worlds, where it's very easy to ship, but actually, if you are shipping a lot of stuff, having really strong ownership on getting that all the way through to production is really, really important. And that's the other thing that I really look for in interviewing product people, designers, or engineers, is you must have strong ownership.
Oh, that's quite cool. But like ultimately, we see the roles kind of merging and becoming hybrid almost, right?
Yeah, we used to talk about full stack engineers, right? People who could start in they could build front end, they could build back end, maybe could do a little bit of DevOps, and you kind of accepted that they would be maybe weaker across all three, but could drive a change end to end, and especially for startups, these were really appealing profiles. And I think about that a lot. Like what used to be a full stack engineer, I now still think of like almost like full stack product management, right? It goes from talking to a customer to understanding their problem, like looking for patterns across customer bases, looking at the market, deciding what to build, all the way through to shipping it. And we can with AI, with Owner, you can be a a great backend engineer who can now use our pattern library to build a pretty great front end, even though that's not necessarily your best skill set. And that can all be kind of supported by the people in the company who are great at design, giving you the primitives and the skills within the repository to be able to help you type in quite an underspecified prompt and end up with like quite a nice looking output, which it looks like is what you've done for your software factory, right? You gave quite an underspecified input, but because you've done the work up front to prepare the repository, I can see that even in absence of very high specificity, Owner did a pretty good job of getting kind of close to what you wanted, and then it's kind of up to you to drive the last 5-10%, if you will.
100%. So I kind of closes the loop to where specking comes in and how much time you spend on specking, and from the factory examples, the initial specking was like a day of specking, which I would say is quite a lot of time nowadays. Compared to yesterday, database was 10 minutes of specking, and the output from a product feel is obviously much worse. But maybe to quickly touch base on this, because this fits nicely into one of the questions that we got from Prashant here. Kind of talking about, okay, you're using AI tools, in this case, Codex and Claude 4.7, and some things work, some things don't work. It kind of comes back to how you set things up, and obviously the tools become incredibly good at producing code, and they are also quite good at coming up with solving complexity, but it really depends on how complex your product ultimately is and how you harness it around, right? In our case with the software factory, there's a lot of automations that check the output of the work, right? And if you don't have this loop, and we've discussed it in the last few episodes about the SDLC and the loops that you need to have to make this work almost autonomously, there's a lot of tooling rather than just going into Codex or Claude and just typing. And Owner obviously has a lot of the tooling already built in. So if you're using the Owner chat, there's a lot of abstraction here that goes into it. But if you come at it with a regular product building mindset, I think the recommendation is start small, build feature by feature, test. And if you want to do it manually, you can. You obviously are accelerated a lot by AI because you can, just instruct it to fix things. But I think what we've shown now with the software factory is that you can even automate this process to check the processes and the output and the tests quite nicely. And we ultimately see this going into a direction where a lot of the process of building is autonomous, and we go back to, okay, deciding this is what we need to build. This is how it needs to look and feel. Depending on personal preferences or company preferences, the data structure should be a certain way. These are the tools that you want to use. And then you iterate from there. But I think right now we're not yet at a magic bullet moment where you can just say to your agent, hey, I want product X, and you get the output in the next day. Maybe one day we'll have that, even within a few minutes. We see acceleration of the LLMs as well, so output becomes much faster. I guess in an organization, you said earlier the time frame you aim for, like new products going into testing phases, like 2 weeks. Naturally, in an organization, you're constrained by the velocity of an organization. So I think we'll also see a lot of that accelerating in the next months, years. But depending on the team size and the processes that you have and that you utilize, something like the software factory obviously makes that even faster.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I'm always impressed at more than people shipping things, actually people killing features and products, right? Google famously does this maybe a little bit too much, and there's a whole website about Google's graveyard of products they've tried to build and sunsetted. But there is something quite admirable about shipping features and going, okay, this hasn't met our success criteria, it hasn't really had the impact we'd wanted, so we're actually going to pull it back and try something else a little bit different, and kind of keeping that product surface very narrow. I think we're seeing a lot of AI tools have quite a lot of bloat, a lot of features, and the surface become wide. And I'm really curious to see how this plays out. Like, will people expect more from software when you do just have like very, very large product services, or are we going to see a bit of a? I think you spoke about it a little bit a moment ago. Is will there be a demand for more minimalism and just very, very high quality smaller apps that are very, very focused on one specific area? And I don't know. When I think about the apps that I use and the ones I love, they tend to be the ones that actually are the latter. They're more minimalistic. They do a couple of things really, really well. And when you look at some of the biggest apps in history. If you look at like Instagram, you look at TikTok, Snapchat, they all are quite simple actually. They've taken something quite complicated, this idea of like a scrollable feed that is infinite, and made it like very, very simple to use. But there's a lot of complexity behind the scenes. So I'm really curious to what the AI version of that looks like. So far, we've landed on it being a prompt box and a stream of text. Wondering if there's a smarter version of that that's even more minimalistic and human centric.
That's true. I guess the question becomes like, what is the UI in the future? Will we stay with text, or is that going to change as well? I guess that's a meta question. So we will see where it goes. No, but I think we've touched base on a lot of change that's happening in product. What to prioritize. Maybe prioritization is the most important thing that we can do in this age of AI. Decide what to build, what not to build. And with that, I think I'll leave you for today. Again, if you're checking out Memo, feel free to leave any feedback, any ideas that you have, what you should still ship on this product, anything that you see is not working as it should. Feel free to submit a bug report directly in the UI now. And yeah, I think that is it for today. Tomorrow we'll have a guest from AWS. We're going to talk a bit more about software factories and different ways of building one. And until then, have a good day. And Matt, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Zach.
Cheers. Bye-bye.